stories. It has a character who is Catholic and not strange. And probably the only one in all of O'Connor, the mother of the unnamed protagonist in this story, is a grown-up Catholic woman who seems to be well-adjusted and reasonable and not particularly grotesque or dangerous, not demented, and such characters are somewhat hard to find. I reviewed the story and tried to think of another way to look at it, and so my few ideas for throwing out at you all tonight come from that. I pulled out my copy of the manuscripts of Flannery O'Connor at Georgia College to check the chart at the beginning, where the authors try to tell you when Flannery O'Connor wrote what, and was reminded that this story was written about the time I was born. That's important, isn't it? And it was also written at just about the same time as a story called A Circle in the Fire. And I think, well, that makes sense. Those stories are quite comparable in some ways. You've got a couple of farmhouses, and here come some visitors to both of these farmhouses, and some complications are going to result. And there's an image at the end of both stories that I guess is key and is similar and in both stories. And maybe she was trying to work out the significance of that image. We'll get to that. When I read commentaries about A Temple of the Holy Ghost, it seems to me that critics want to get to the character who's working in the shide show at the fair as quickly as possible. Intersex character who is on display at the fair that shocks the visiting cousins. And I think it is a fascinating part of the story, and we'll get to that character at some point, but I want to put my emphasis on the three little girls and the opening pages for tonight, until somebody raises their hand and says, we want to talk about the intersex character. Flannery O'Connor probably is the little girl, the unnamed protagonist in this story. Oh, big reveal. She's probably also the little girl in the other story she was writing at this time, A Circle in the Fire, which we'll do next month. This character has a couple of cousins. And golly gee, Flannery O'Connor has a couple of cousins. And I will just say about that these characters probably are Flannery O'Connor's cousins, even though Flannery O'Connor's actual cousins do not particularly see themselves in these characters of Temple 1 and Temple 2. The opening sentence of the story is an attack on one of the cousins. And that's really where I want to start trying to say something about it, okay? All weekend, the two girls were calling each other Temple 1 and Temple 2, shaking with laughter and getting so red and hot that they were positively ugly, particularly Joanne, who had spots on her face anyway. And I want to invite you to contemplate with me the oxymoron, positively ugly. There's a lot of ugliness in this story. There's a lot of meanness in this story. There's a lot of laughter in this story. And if this sentence were written by somebody else to start another story, you might say, well, there's something wrong with laughing. What do we mean by positively ugly? Do we just mean really ugly? Or may I suggest that ugliness might have something positive to it too? You could get through this whole story and talk yourself into the notion that making fun of people, laughing at them, picking at them, making fun of their looks is a bad thing to do. And in some situations in real life, I suppose it is a bad thing to do. But we're talking Flannery O'Connor, who never missed an opportunity to make fun of people. You know, the nice little anecdote about that is when William Sessions, the authorized biographer of Flannery O'Connor, found out that Flannery O'Connor had been making fun of him in letters to Betty Hester for years, he went into a funk, but he recovered. And I remember seeing him one time, and somehow the topic came up, how about those letters? And he pointed his finger at me and he said, and if Flannery O'Connor knew you, she would have made fun of you too. And I think, yeah, she would. She goes after everybody. She leaves nobody unsatirized. If you have any quirk to your looks, she'll write about it. She'll put it in a letter. She'll put it in a story. She'll use it. She can be really mean. Okay, so it's a question to ask yourself as you read this story. Is this a story about a little girl who learns to be nice, who learns to be a good little Catholic girl, who learns to put away those childish things of being mean and nasty, making fun of people and feeling so superior and all of that stuff? Or not? I would say, or not. I would say she learns that she's Flannery O'Connor, that she is inherently mean and nasty and satirical and inclined to laugh at everybody. And that's fine. She's just going to keep on doing that for the rest of her life, I think, at the end of this story. And she's decided that she's okay. She can have a healthy ego about this. And she doesn't have to feel terribly guilty about these habits of her personality. It's okay to laugh at people. And even if it does make you positively ugly, that might be the side of the grotesque where there's something to be said for it. You know, Flannery would be presented with the notion that she was a Southern Gothic writer every once in a while, like in interviews, and she never accepted the label. She always said, no, I'm not part of that. I don't want to be part of the school of Southern degeneracy. She'd make fun of a certain kind of Southern Gothic writer. But she would accept the term grotesque. She says, I'm all about the grotesque. And well, I guess there's a lot of debate, a lot of confusion about what's the difference. What's the difference between being Gothic and being grotesque? My answer to that, I don't know if it's Flannery's answer. My answer to that is, the Gothic can be horrible and funny, and at its best, you can sympathize with the people who are stuck in the situations. In the grotesque, there is something positive about the ugliness, and you're watching the world being transformed, redeemed, reborn, made new again, improved as you watch the grotesque play out sometimes, not always, but much of the time in O'Connor. There's something good in the works when you're looking at something that's grotesque. And that's not an idea about the story that I expect is going to get a whole lot of agreement out of people when I first plop it out there. I would just say, you know, next time you read the story, ask yourself over and over and over, is there anything good to what you see that's being thrown at you in here that is grotesque? One of the things that struck me as I was reviewing the story was that over the years I have talked myself into the idea that there is something in the story that I couldn't find this time I was going through it. Okay. It's a female initiation story. I mean, I think part of O'Connor's aim, even though she's writing a story that has no plot, is that she's going to write an initiation story, and it's going to be female, which is uncommon in its time, and it's going to be Catholic, which is uncommon in its time. She wants to say I think, tell herself that that's the originality of what's going on in the story. And what strikes me on this review is that the initiation doesn't really seem to me to happen. Or if it does, our little protagonist, whom I love, I mean, you know, I'm all for her, she doesn't quite understand it. And, you know, that doesn't throw me too much, because one of my grand generalizations about Flannery O'Connor is that the mind is not that important in Flannery O'Connor. You know, you don't have to understand what's happening to you; it's still happening to you, and that's good enough. But I always thought that by the end of the story,
Bruce, we've got some interesting comments in the comments section.
Okay.
Martin, do you want to chime in, or are you satisfied with what you wrote there? You want to? Let me try to unmute you.
Yeah.
There we go. My unmute button.
Oh, I can read it.
Work.
Anybody who survived her childhood has enough information about life to last her the rest of his or her days. And in this story, she makes fun of everyone, including herself. Yes.
Yeah. And I thought that the child is probably gets it the worst in this story.
Right. And that's something that you have to look for, but it's there. It's all over the place that she makes a fool of herself. And the satire is points at the main character and therefore the author too. There's nobody who's safe from the satire. The nice example of that is, I mean, it's a little complicated, but I think it makes the point. When she's making fun of the Wilkins boys, she calls them a dumb ox. Well, dumb ox, unknown to the character, is one of the nicknames that was attached to Aquinas, who wrote the Tantum Ergo the Catholic hymn that the cousins have just sung.
Mhm.
So it is not appropriate for the little girl to use that term to put down the visitors. You know, she's getting something wrong and looks a little foolish at that point. And that's the sort of foolishness on the part of the main character that you have to go do your research to uncover. And I think it's a little joke that Flannery plants in the story that the little girl's not going to understand, but that readers are supposed to figure out. And doesn't make her look good. It makes her look like she's inappropriately mean, and she's not even making a good attack on the Wilkins boys. And yet, I would still say, at the end of the story, she's going to keep on making such attacks on people. She's still going to satirize everybody. She's not going to learn to. She's not going to learn to be a good little girl. I don't think. You know. And let's see, what else shall we say?
Rita Mae Reese has.
Yeah, Rita Mae, you want to say it?
Oh yeah, it was just the story. All of her stories remind me of this quote from Carolyn Gordon, but when Carolyn Gordon said that O'Connor needed to stop writing about fatherless freaks so much, which always struck me as particularly mean since O'Connor lost her father.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a painful part of her life.
Mm-hmm.
But
Where's Charlotte?
I don't know, babe. Go find her. Sorry.
That's okay.
Zoom mobbers. But yeah, there is that empathy, you know, in this story that I think is remarkable between the child who doesn't even see, like they're not in the same scene together except imaginatively. There's that connection.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Harriet, you had a
And
nice
Harriet?
comment too.
Yeah, I was, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, okay. So I was thinking, as you were talking, I thought you might be thinking too, of Monica Miller's book, Being Ugly, thinking about Southern women writers' rebellions through characters who are in that particularly Southern phrase, don't be ugly. I have to say, I always wonder about O'Connor on this question of her pointing out the condescension of the characters that you kind of identify as Flannery, that her sense of and her sense of the sin of feeling superior. But I'm with you that I don't think that that's going to change in our girl. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the moral to the story is do be ugly, just be good at it. Don't
Recognize your
do
culpability.
subpar being ugly. Just go right ahead and be a specialist in being ugly. This does seem like the kind of story that's perfect for Monica's approach to Southern writing and Southern women's writing in general. At the end of the story, oh yeah, Marty?
Yeah, let me unmute him. There we go. You want to try to unmute yourself, Barney? There.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Bruce, that I think you're right, and the idea about that she doesn't, the girl, the child, isn't going to learn from all this. She's going to continue to be ugly or be mean or whatever, and yet the sense is also, there's also this sense of awareness that she's not perfect, and O'Connor puts that in the story too, I think. The girl is going to continue to be ignorant in some ways, or at least prideful, even though she prays, you know, to not be prideful. She reminds me of the young version of Joy Holga. This is the girl that Joy Holga grows up to be. I mean, Joy Holga is the person who grows up from this girl. Because in the end, she's also very making fun of the good country people and the Bible salesman and all that. And yet she also gets kind of her comeuppance and finds out she doesn't know as much as she thinks she knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're right. O'Connor in this is expressing that idea of continuing to be ugly, to make fun of folks and be smarter than they are, but also she knows that she has to be aware of the pridefulness in all of that too.
Yeah. At the end of the story, after whatever recognition scene she's had at the convent and at Mass, she gets in the car and she's looking at Alonzo's, head and saying he looks like a pig. I mean, she's right back into who can I make fun of next? And I think, well, she's not going to change. This is just how her mind works, and this is what she does for fun, and she better make the most of it, because she may have learned something, but it is the value of her mindset, of her inclinations that she used to think of as bad, and I would say she's learning that she's okay, even though she's got those faults. Let me take another running stab at my other idea for tonight, which is that one of the things that I thought was in the story was that she catches on to the significance of her body more than I think she does. And a lot of the great jokes of the story are about the head versus the rest of the body. And she learns in the course of the story that she's a temple of the Holy Ghost, and she thinks that's a great thing. And she's learning that gender is complicated, and she's going to deal with that. And she gets a hint that she is eventually going to grow up, and that's going to make her be more like her cousins, and someday like an adult. Yeah, I think she gets all of that. But everything she learns, it seems to me, has to do with her head. And I kept waiting to be wrong about that, and I never could persuade myself. At the beginning of the story, her mother is talking about how the nuns at the convent keep control of the cousins. She holds them by the neck, so they can't get into trouble. There's all that talk about what was at the fair, and the little girl can't figure out how you could be male and female without having two heads, because all that matters is the neck and above, let's say. When she wants to tell a story to impress her cousins about biological secrets that she knows, she's got the little story about the rabbit that gave birth by spitting the babies out of its mouth, which is a wonderful detail. It's just a totally charming bit of this story as far as I'm concerned. They tell her that the intersex person who's at the fair, at the freak show, holds up a blue dress to show the crowd, the mystery of the body. And even then, she doesn't make it be anything about genitalia. She's still stuck in the idea that, well, it must be something to do with the head. At the end of the story, they go to the convent, and I would say the key moment of what happens to the little girl at church is she gets a big hug from a nun who swoops down on her. And what impresses her about the hug is that the nun is wearing a crucifix around her belt. And so she gets a crucifix smashed into her head. She goes, after this big moment, whatever that means, to have a crucifix smashed into your head, she gets into the car to go home at the end. She's in the back seat of a car, which the whole story has said is a dangerous place. It's, you know, it's where you have to know you're a temple of the Holy Ghost. It's where you have to be careful with boys. Is the little girl thinking about, you know, being in the back seat of a car with a boy? Is she thinking about how her body's changing? I would say no. She sits in the back seat of the car and she has a vision. She sits by the window and she looks out of the car. She's not thinking about where she is in the back seat of the car. She looks out of the car and, oh good, I haven't found my page. And then she says, you know, and then there's a line at the end of the story that, you know, everybody loves to parse, and they should. The sun was like a huge red ball. The sun was a huge red ball, like an elevated host, drenched in blood. And when it sank out of sight, it left a line in the sky like a red clay road hanging over the trees. Well, the host that she's just, you know, been looking at during Mass is in the world. It's like, you know, the universe is the host and the universe is the sacrament. Okay, I get that. Some people look at that image and they say there's a suggestion of menstruation at the end. She's going to become a woman and there will be blood. She's growing up. Does she interpret that way? Does the little girl say to herself, oh, that sun is like the host drenched in blood and I am becoming a woman? Or is the little girl still stuck in, you know, what we can really believe a 12-year-old might understand? And is the narrator, the author, imposing on that image more significance than the character can see in it? Anybody want to comment on that? I
think Rita May wants to come.
Yeah, Rita May.
I was just waving a goodbye at the people who were leaving.
Waving goodbye. Okay, I thought you were going to explain something to me.
Well, you know, Bruce, if I wanted to add, you know, when you talk about the body versus the head thing, one of the things that interests, I love the line too, is when she says, I could be a martyr, but I couldn't be a saint. That really kind of sort of explodes a little bit in that body and head dichotomy you set up.
Mm-hmm. Sure. She could, well, you know, what does that mean? I could be a martyr if I didn't have to involve the head. You know, if they just cut my head off,
right? Then
I can be good. She doesn't say I could be a saint, I could change my character. No, but
she knows that's not possible.
Plan B, where I just have to submit to something, and it's quick, and
my body's not really connected to me.
And my body's really not really involved. I mean, it gets killed, but it's something that happens to the head again. And this is a question I have about this story, you know, is Flannery writing a story that illustrates her own notion? She said this to some people, that she kind of thought that growing up was not a very good idea. You know, she didn't ever want to become a teenager. She just thought teenagers were silly and better if you just stopped at about I forget what age she said, 12 might be a good choice. You know, just don't ever do all that stuff. It's unpleasant. Is this a story about growing up is a bad idea and you should just live as a 12-year-old forever, and growing up is kind of inherently tragic? Now, I don't know if I really believe what I just said. I will go ahead and point out that that sort of statement about not wanting to grow up, is that growing up is tragic, is something people say all the time about another Georgia writer who is on Flannery O'Connor's mind a lot of the time, and that would be Carson McCullers. And if you put this story, certain passages in it, up next to Carson McCullers, you can see that Carson McCullers was probably right when she said Flannery imitated her. The passage when the little girl is, you know, trying to deal with the question she's actually going to eat with the cousins, and there's a description of the setting in which this could take place, and there is a certain lyricism that suddenly appears in a Flannery O'Connor story. Doesn't happen very often. A certain beauty, and the passage where the little girl wants to imagine that the Wilkins boys could be in love with her. She might have to change their character and their looks for that to work, but she's willing to fantasize about that. To me, that's something out of Carson McCullers, and it's not completely consistent with some of the rest of the way this character's mind works through the rest of the story. And I think it's good for the story that Flannery, you know, was thinking about Carson McCullers for a while, because I think it is true. The little girl is kind of like her cousins, and she does want love and she does want romance. She just doesn't quite know how to get there. And I don't know if she knows how to get there even on the last page of the story. It's a problem. Part of a larger problem. Yeah.
Harry has a question.
I was just going to interact with what you're saying. Can you hear me now? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're pointing out how much she's in the head, but I'm wondering about what the story's attitude is to the body, and I'm thinking about what's beauty in the story, and I'm thinking about the hymn and the service, and a kind of that both of those scenes come through to me with a sense of beauty, and then we get to sexuality or the body, and I'm thinking about how much the body is in this story vulnerability, that the cousins are obsessed in ways that she sees as ridiculous, but that also makes the cousins vulnerable. I'm thinking about the sideshow body that is both God's creation, but is also saying, don't laugh. And I'm thinking over to Good Country People. And if we're going to think about how good Joy is the grown-up version of this little girl, and thinking about sexuality as the potential for rape, the potential for being attacked through sexual contact, and I don't know. So you got me thinking about this.
Right. I would say beauty is important, but this is a story that says ugliness is beautiful. And you have a character who is Christ-like saying, don't laugh, but everybody else in the story is inclined to, has an inclination to laugh at a character like that. And it's about how do you deal with that? You know, how are you supposed to feel about that? Let me go at it another way. This is a story about how does the body, how does sexuality relate to religion? And you can, I think you can read the whole story and say, they're supposed to be separate. But I don't think that's right.
Right.
Not the way I read the story. I think the story says everything religious is sexual and everything sexual is about to,
Right.
Could turn religious on you. And I don't know that the kid has figured this out, but the story has. You know, the sideshow body, that's a nice term. The sideshow body knows that being touched by God gave that person this body. And those two little Protestant kids know that a hymn about Jesus, it's a love song at the same time. And I think you can find lots of other places in Flannery O'Connor where religiosity and sexuality are being forced together, are being equated, but it happens over and over and over. And she's in favor of that. She doesn't want them to be separate realms at all. But she doesn't force the little girl in this story to figure all that out. She grows up and she learns some things, but God made me this way, and whatever that means, whatever this way is, it's being endorsed. And I would say, well, ugliness, spitefulness, laughing at people, being on the lookout for the next mean thing you can say to somebody, those are part of what's being endorsed. So is beauty. So is being of dual nature. So is being male and female at the same time. That's being endorsed. There's a lot that's being endorsed at in the course of the story. I would say this is a very happy story in a way. Now, I say that, and I have to add the footnote. George Bigford, the priest, came to my class one time. We happened to be scheduled to talk about Temple of the Holy Ghost that week. And I said, George, you want to talk to people about a Temple of the Holy Ghost? He said, sure. And he really did a thing on a Temple of the Holy Ghost. And what sticks in my mind about it is he wanted to make sure everybody knew that it wasn't the Catholics who shut down the fair. You know, it wasn't the Catholics who put the sideshow body out of business. It was the Protestants. The Protestants are the one who think the body is evil, and Catholics are wiser than that. And you know, everybody said, "Oh, well, it's really interesting. Now we know the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism." And there's something to be said for that. And yet, I think O'Connor lets the little girl not need to figure that out at the end of the story. She can remain innocent in her head of a lot of stuff. You know,
Bruce, Martin has some interesting things.
Yeah,
to say
Martin,
about
what else? Marty?
religiosity.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with all the stuff you're saying here, Bruce. And bringing up this idea of Protestantism and Catholicism, throughout the story, I see how it's very interesting how these ideologies are pitted against each other. And then at the end, that imagery of the ivory white sun in the afternoon that turns into the red ball,
Red ball.
shaped like the host, red, drenched in blood,
Sure.
which is clearly an image of transubstantiation, the Catholic ideology, pitted against a Protestant Church of God ideology, which would be that it's merely symbolic, it's merely consubstantiation, and that these is not a true, and this connects to the idea of that true change is more mysterious than simplistic biological change.
Right.
And then also, but I do find it interesting that the little girl's dream, when she falls asleep finally before the sisters get home, before the cousins get home.
Yeah.
She dreams a Bible thumping preacher's dream. The sideshow speaker's voice comes out. And it's interesting to me how her dream is not as a Catholic priest or not in Latin, but it's she dreams in that kind of call and response that we got in the story that the cousins told her. So
and anyway. She's sure that the ideas that she associates with the sideshow person, that this is true, this is real, that this is divine revelation, that of course she's putting all these ideas into that character. She's creating her own theology here at the age of 12, in the course of the story, but she's sure that's right. And let me just mention in passing, you're bringing up a big question. Is there a war between Catholicism and Protestantism, or between Catholicism and anything other than Catholicism, all the way through Flannery O'Connor? And most of the time, my attitude is, nah, not really. I think she's very ecumenical, and she's very inclined to see what's valuable in Protestants, and very inclined to pick out all the faults of her Catholic characters. That's why it's so hard to find, a character who's Catholic and as nice as the child's mother in this story. You have to go searching for anybody who's, not being satirized, who happens to be Catholic in the fiction. Oh yeah, I don't know if I ever connected the dots quite as much as I wanted to. The cook says to the little girl, God could strike you deaf, dumb, and blind. Deaf, dumb, and blind. If God touches you, it's going to be, you're going to know it in your head. And it seems to me, she believes it. And at the end, she gets the crucifix pressed into her head, and she knows that's significant somehow. It's still, I kept waiting for, where's the recognition about what's happening in her body? And it just seems to me it never happens. And that's a puzzle, especially since the story is about the connection between religion and sexuality. And it seems to be that Flannery O'Connor in general is saying they're totally connected. But this story seems to me just doesn't quite go there and insist that has to be part of the initiation story for this character. Let's see. Does anybody want to say anything about Tanta Marigot? It's the only place Flannery sticks a Latin into a story. I mean, it seems like a big deal. Irene told me that she was willing to forward, what was it exactly? She would forward to anybody who wants to see it. Was it a performance?
Yes, it was. It's a Gregorian chant. It's normally done when they present the adoration of the host and mass. And there was a woman who sang it. It was just a very beautiful one. I'll share it when I send out the thank you note to y'all.
Good. Yeah. And the story is insisting that this is not the kind of music that the Church of God boys are used to. It's that they're totally polar opposites. Although there is Jew singing, brought up in that scene. you know.
Though the two songs really are about one's relationship. I mean, I know you don't want to go into the religious aspects necessarily, but one's relationship with Christ's resurrection and how one should perceive that. So, I mean, there is a through line there between the two songs.
Yeah, and then the way they sing it, it might as well be a country western love song. I would.
Right.
They got the guitar and the whole bit going, and the way they look at them when they sing, I think it's supposed to be a seduction. And for those boys, those coincide totally. And to me, that's something that Protestantism is comfortable with, even though there's guilt involved too. We can talk about different versions of guilt: Catholic guilt and Jewish guilt, Protestant guilt. That's a fun conversation, but maybe that's over to the side. What else is there to say about this story? I got a phone call one time from, this is a question, not a comment. I got a phone call one time from Patricia Yeager at the University of Michigan, and she said, "Quick, tell me about everything Flannery O'Connor knew about movies." And it was totally unhelpful. I said, "I don't know nothing about Flannery O'Connor in movies. I mean, I know we had theaters in downtown Milledgeville. She must have wandered in there and seen some movies of her time." So, you know, that's been in the back of my mind for a long time. And, you know, there must be something there. I keep thinking if we ever see Bill Sessions' authorized biography, he'll tell us about every movie Flannery O'Connor saw while in graduate school in Iowa City. Maybe, maybe not. But
Victoria
Victoria
also has a question, not about movies, I suspect, but.
No, what I was wondering is whether y'all think there's any connection between the intersex person's complete acceptance of the way they are, the way God made them, and Flannery's efforts to be completely accepting of the way God made her, the lupus.
Well, sure. The lupus is one more part of that, you know, and, you know, there's that famous line about, "With one eye squinted, I can take it all as a blessing." You know, that's her statement about, well, maybe it's good I got lupus. Wow, that's hard to get one's head around, but I think she tried to say, you know, it's good for me to have everything that's come my way, and it's my job to
Accept it
and make the most of it. Yeah, I can buy that. Where I was going with the sidebar about movies is a question: why are their names Wendell and Corey? There's a movie star named Wendell Corey. He was in Rear Window and Sorry, Wrong Number. I can make almost no sense of this whatsoever, but it has to be a movie joke created by Flannery O'Connor for somebody to understand someday. And I just don't get it. Is it that we're supposed to think these boys really are dangerous? And Mama should have been more worried than she was about, you know, 16-year-old boys with cars, with a car, and their preacher's kids? I mean, you know, you could say that's 3 red flags that Mom is ignoring here. But that's a part of the story that still eludes me. I'm waiting for the light bulb to go on to say, oh, well, of course, that's inevitable. That's inevitable for this story. What else do we want to say about this thing? She doesn't want to go to paradise. She wants to go back and be with the lions again. I think that's perfect. I mean, it fits perfectly into this story. And it's about avoiding the step into perfection and wanting to come back to something that's dangerous and complicated and maybe self-contradictory, like having lions about to tear you up and yet they fall in love with you. I think that's a wonderful O'Connor moment. We haven't said anything about the Virgin Mary yet. The intersex body is dressed in a blue dress, which we all know is like, the immediate hint that you're supposed to think about the Virgin Mary here. And I don't know, does anybody have a bright idea about the Virgin Mary as relevant to this story? I guess I can say, whoa, we are being asked to take the body of the person who's working in the sideshow as divine. And so, if the sideshow person is wearing the Virgin Mary's dress, I guess that's a sign that we should, take this person very seriously and believe that it makes sense for the little girl to see that person as divine. But then I just feel like, okay, there might be a little bit more to that that I've never quite been able to figure out.
Linda seems to have something to add.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Unmute her.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to unmute yourself, Linda. Let me see.
Where's Linda? Oh, there's Linda. You're still mute.
There you
Okay.
go.
There you go.
I was just thinking the Virgin Mary didn't have to have sex.
So she could just stay symbolically 12 her whole life.
Yeah.
and everything was okay. Well, maybe that's the point that Flannery's saying, hey, there's a career path. I should just marry and dispense with all that with all that other stuff. And darn if I didn't forget again, maybe by 7 o'clock I'll get this looked up. There is talk about the word monstrance in this story. And I've heard that it's true and not true that the word monstrance is connected etymologically to the word monster. And it seems like a wonderful idea that fits this story. That the monstrance that we see at the end is supposed to be compared to the sideshow figure, and that they're both, one's in the temple that's holding mass and the other is in the temple that is the sideshow tent. Seems perfect that should be built into the word monstrance. And then I read something else that said, oh, no, that's not it at all. Those have nothing to do with each other in the history of how words get formed. It almost tempts me to say, I don't care whether that's true or not. The words seem similar enough that it seems right to think of that as a play on words that Flannery might be using. Not that she wants you to think that the show figure is a monster. That's a little troubling.
Martin has a few comments, and also we want to point out that Jason had a good joke for those of us who suffer as guilty, half Catholics, half Protestants, like myself.
Yes.
Well, my comment is actually a question, although quickly on the idea of the Latin and all that stuff. Does the girl association with the lions link her to Mary, who supposedly the animals bow down in the manger and all that? And I like the idea about Mary being a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
But also maybe the link is to Francis of Assisi, who is more sees the animals as in a kind of innocent way, as opposed to the cousins who sing that song from Aquinas, who thought animals were just dumb animals who couldn't reason and had no souls.
Mm.
So I thought that was it. But my question is, I was curious throughout the story. I'm reading all these colors, and then at the end, of course, we get the really big ivory white sun, which later is compared to the red blood-drenched host. And I wonder if you or anybody else thinks of these colors that we see throughout the story as mere camouflage to help maybe avoid that big reveal at the end from sticking out too much? Or do people find significance to the colors being used throughout the story in some sort of special way?
I have an answer to that. I don't know if my answer is as applicable to this story as to a lot of the rest of O'Connor. It'll come to me in a minute who said white is a lie in O'Connor. I'm not the first one to say that, but nothing's white, nobody's white. Anything that's white is on its way to being something better. Colors are always changing. Everything is turning into something else. White light is always being refracted, and that's good. The world is multicolored. It isn't black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, this becomes a racial comment, even though we all know that Flannery's been getting in a lot of deserved trouble lately for her racist comments. In her writing, I think she, subtly said some pretty progressive things about color that suggest that whiteness is an illusion. And so camouflage is a good thing if you think of it as a mixing of a bunch of colors, but I don't think you're supposed to not see camouflage. You're supposed to see more when you look at a mixture of colors. There's a reason why she liked peacocks. They're not known for being simply and straightforwardly colored. Somebody told me recently, I just love this detail, I hope it's true, that peacock feathers have no pigment in them, that they have the effect on our eyes because of the way they refract light.
Right.
Oh, that's wonderful. I hope Flannery knew that. It's a wonder she didn't say that in an essay someplace, that they're no color, but they impress you with, an overkill of multiplicity of colors juxtaposed to each other.
Yeah.
I think, that's ultimately an idea that O'Connor finds very appealing, that the world is in every sense multicolored.
Well, and the sun isn't white, it's ivory.
Right, it's not white. It's not white. White's an illusion. Ivory is okay. But
no, I'm just saying what you say makes sense, though. It couldn't just be white. It needs to be something more than white, I think.
More than white.
So that's interesting.
I got started on this whole train of thought one time when Cliff Boyer did an index to every word used in the complete stories. And at one point, he had a section about color, and he listed every color O'Connor applied to anything. And it went on for pages and pages and pages and pages. And it woke me up a little bit. But now when I go through the story, I say, she is really working at varying how many colors she can throw into I even was affected by this train of thought when I read the last line. the host drenched in blood, you know, the sun at the end, when it sank out of sight, it left a line in the sky like a red clay road hanging over the trees. And who have we been told looks like a red clay road in this story? Mr. Cheatham. You know, the one who's courting Mrs. Kirby. Miss Kirby. What's that mean? I don't think that the little girl is sitting there saying, and someday I'm going to be courted by somebody like Mr. Cheatham. But I think the imagery vaguely suggests that there's more that lies in store for this little girl than she is ready for. And all we're going to get from the author is little hints. She did say Miss Kirby too is a temple of the Holy Ghost, and so that's one version of where she's headed, you know, later on.
Well, Bruce,
Stop. How are we doing?
we're at 5:36 once again. Despite having nothing to talk about, we managed to find something to talk about.
There's nothing to talk about in this story. Nothing happens. Nobody's killed. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. We
We'll
will
do
see
this
you
again
soon.
sometime.
Yeah.
I can remember to send out the invitations properly. All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
See you all later.
See you all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Marty.
Hi, Bruce. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Okay, I haven't read all this. Okay. Okay.
Y'all done? Or you want to?
Well, we certainly filled that hour, didn't we?
Yes, we did. On to 7 o'clock.
I managed to take a little nap this afternoon.
Ooh, you seem a little
I'm going to
refreshed.
be a little fresher and more with it at 7 o'clock than I
Mhm.
have sometimes been. Can you think of anything I should do differently at 7 o'clock?
No, I think
I have to look for the link to 7 o'clock.
I sent it to you because I sent you both
Just again?
times.
Okay. Well, you sent me both times. And the way I got to the 4:30 link was I have a little reminder in the corner of the screen that says, idiot, click on this.
Mhm.
And I hope that there's one for 7 o'clock when I turn this off. But if not, I'm going to be searching through old emails. And
Yeah, or I'll send you another one.
if I don't find it, I will send you an email, a separate email, and ask you to send it to me again.
Okay.
So, you know, that's one of my fears. While I've got you here, I'm thinking, okay, we're taping all these things and stockpiling them in Andalusia Institute.
Mhm.
And I'm teaching Flannery O'Connor class next semester. Couldn't I just give people who are taking that class instructions on how to watch these videos? And they, well, that one's covered.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
A class is online through Andalusia Institute. Just make sure you know how to look for old.
I'll send you there's two places they can go. They can go to Facebook or they can go to our website. I'll send you the links for that. And
well, we'll do
be all
that in
set.
December. We'll do this in December or January. I just wanted to know, because I'm thinking, well, okay, when I'm picking stories for spring, I might as well pick stories with that in mind.
Mhm.
You know, a batch of stories, there will be book club videos, but we can say, okay, you saw it, you know, you witnessed a discussion. Email me if you have questions and comments.